Hi everyone, I'm Gary Blank and I want to welcome you to another parent-teacher video lesson from the earlygiftedmanual.com, my free website for homeschooled children 3 to 7 years old and their parents that promotes and develops giftedness at an early age. And as all these videos are designed to work in conjunction with the program on my website, I urge you to click on the URL link in the description box below to check out the complete curriculum that I am offering to you and your child. Welcome everyone to Lesson 1, the Alphabetic Principle. And the only materials you will need for this lesson will be paper and pencil. It can be any kind of paper. I'm using a piece of copy paper here. And as you can see, I'm going to be using a Sharpie because that shows up a little better in this video. Or you could use some people prefer to work with their child with a whiteboard or what they call a dry erase board and a dry erase marker. It's your choice. So let's begin by talking about letters. And you can tell your child, you can make this statement, there are 26 letters in our language, the English language, and we call these 26 letters the alphabet. And just to give him an idea of what you're talking about, if he or she doesn't already know, they may already understand that. You could just write out a few. And lowercase letters only, that's very, very important. You don't want to be working with capital letters yet. That just confuses the issue. That can come along a little later. So I emphasize that again, lowercase letters only, and you could, like I said, write out a few. You could probably write out all of them if you wanted to. I'm just going to write out a few. Make sure you put spaces between them so you don't confuse your child. So that'll give him or her a little bit of an idea of what you're talking about, like I said, if they don't know already. And then you can make this very important statement to your child, because it's really everything that he will be doing, learning these, the alphabetic principle hinges on this statement. And you could say, each letter stands for a sound that people can make with their voices. And if he or she doesn't understand that, well, you can show them. Let's start out like this, maybe with this letter. And you could say, this letter stands for the sound p, p, p. And that's a sound that we can all make with our voices. Try another one. This letter stands for the sound t, t. This letter stands for the sound ah, ah, ah. Maybe one more here. This letter stands for the sound mm. And of course, it's very important that you identify these by sounds only, no letter names, because once again, that will just confuse the issue. You want to isolate the concept here. You're trying to get the point across that each of these 26 letters in the alphabet stands for a sound that people can make with their voices. So once again, identify them by sounds only and not letter names. And now you could introduce the concept of a word. What exactly is a word? Well, you can tell your child the 26 letters of the alphabet can be put together to make words or make a word. And we can read these words by sounding out each letter and then putting the sounds together. what we adults and teachers and adults like to call blending. So let's, children have to see stuff. Those two statements probably won't mean much to him or her. So let's do some examples. And I've already written out a word here. And here's how you want to present this to your child. Use your finger, point to the first letter there and say, this letter stands for the sound mm. This letter stands for the sound eh. This letter stands for the sound mm. Now watch, you can blend these sounds together to read the word. Man. Man. And what you do is every time you bring your finger across, you go a little faster. Man. Man. And hopefully by this time, your child will be jumping up and down in her chair and saying, oh, that word is man. And of course, the word is man. Let's try maybe a couple more. All right. Once again, with your finger, this letter stands for the sound f. This letter stands for the sound I. This letter stands for the sound t. F, it, f, it, fit, fit, and hopefully he or she will yell out, oh, that word is fit. And maybe one more here. And while I'm thinking of it here, you can point out to your child, you could say, look, these letters are close together. They're right next to each other, the letters in these words. And that's very important. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So anyway, let's do this example here. This letter stands for the sound k. This letter stands for the sound eh. This letter stands for the sound t. Here we go. K, et, cat, cat. And of course, hopefully he will, like I said, be jumping up and down and saying, oh, that word is cat. So very simple exercise, but it gets the whole point of the alphabetic principle across very well. And you could tell your child at this point, so these letters are symbols, and symbols are something that stands for something else. You could tell them that. Or you might even want to use the term sound pictures. That's a good term to use. So you could say these letters are like sound pictures. They tell you what sound to make, and you can make that sound with your voice, or you could make the sound silently in your head. So there's some things that he or she can think about. And at this point, I'd like to mention to you, the parent, that there are two things that you really don't want to do. You don't want to name the letter. That will really confuse the issue. So I can't emphasize that enough. Just letter sounds. And another thing you don't want to do is like point to this letter here and say, the M says, well, you've named the letter, so that's one not very good thing there. And the other thing you've done is you said the M says, but I can tell you, and I'm sure you realize this, that letters don't talk, people do. So, this is the way you should be presenting. You can't make statements like the M says or whatever, or you can't really name the letter. Two bad ideas, sources of confusion. All right. Let me make another point here. And you could make this point to your child. You could tell her, well, whether you're reading or writing, in both of these, there are spaces between words. And you could actually write that whole sentence out. there are spaces between words. All right, and of course you don't want to even be talking about punctuation or capital letters yet, so don't get into that. We'll just leave it as it is here, and now you can show your child exactly what you mean, and you could say, look, that's a word, 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 and look, between those words there are empty spaces. And just to check to see if he understands that, have him point to the words or even count the words like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. However, if your child is having some confusion, you could do this. I'm going to take like a different colored marker here, and and you could do this to show your child the spaces between the words. And you could say, look, you see that empty space there? I put a little box around it. Those are the spaces between the words. And now you could have him or her try to count them again. And if he or she is still confused, you could just do this. You could say, okay, I'm going to circle the words for you. All right, and have him or her point to the words or count the words. So obviously at this point you want to make very certain that your child knows what a letter is, knows what a word is, and understands the difference between a letter and a word. So now let's look at, we've looked at reading words, let's look at writing words. And you could make this statement to your child. You could say, well, we write words by hearing each sound in the word and then writing the letter for each sound. And of course, we teachers and adults call this process segmenting. So as you can see, the parent can see, this is going to present a bit more of a challenge for your child. In reading, the hints are there, and now the thinking process and the process of creating this word are going to be a lot more challenging. So enough blah blah, as they say here. Your child has to see an example. So let's say, well, Susan, I want to write the word pig, and here's how I do it. I have to break that word up into the various sounds in the word. And let me see, pig, p, I, g. And you could say, well, listen, there are 3 different sounds in the word pig, p, I, g. And you could say, okay, the first one is p, and I know the letter for p is this. The next sound is I, and I know the letter for that sound is this. And the last sound is G, and I know the letter, or you might want to say the sound picture for that is this. So there you go. Obviously, it's the exact opposite of reading. In writing, you're encoding the words, and in reading, you're decoding the words. So maybe another example here. Let's say, well, Bob, you could tell your child, Bob, I want to write the word set, and here is how I do it. Let's see, what are the sounds in set? S-et. Sounds like 3 sounds to me. S-et. So, this letter stands for the sound S. Let's see, what's the next sound? Eh. I know that this letter stands for that sound. And let's see, what was that last sound again? T, t. And here's the sound picture for t. And there is the word, set. And I could do many more examples, but I think I'll stop right there. You get the idea. But you should do several of these for your child so they really get the idea. And at this point, I would like to say, make sure your child understands that the letters in a word must be close together. I mean, obviously, as you can see, and you can show this to your child, there's a space between these two words, and each of these words has 3 letters. But if you write pig like this, that's not the word pig. That's pig. Or you could do this. Say, well, that's not the word pig. The letters have to be close together. And all letters in a word are close together, and there are spaces between words. So make sure you make that point also. So a good way to conclude this lesson might be to do something like this, to simply show your child the connection that exists between these different things, with the spoken word, reading, and writing. And you could perhaps start out like this. You could write this out. Anything that you can say, you can write. And of course, you just proved that because as you were saying it, you were writing it out. So that's pretty straightforward. Let's try this one. You could try this one with your child. And in this case, you're going to write this one out first silently, and you'll understand why in just a minute here. And you could tell your child, here's what this says. You could read it for her. Anything that you can think, you can write. And you prove that to her by writing it out silently. You were thinking it and you wrote it out. So these 2 statements I just made, or wrote out rather, they might be obvious, to you, the adult, but they're not always obvious to children. So this is a good thing to do with them. So let's look at maybe another statement here. Anything that you can hear, you can write. And you could prove this to your child by saying, well, say something and I'll hear it, I'll listen to it, and I'll write it out. And your child can say something. It could be anything as long as it's not some kind of gibberish. So let's use this one as an example. Often children will just say, I don't know what to say. So you can say, well, I can write that. I don't know what to say. All right. And maybe one more here. Anything that you or another person can write, you can read. And we've already kind of proven that. But let's take it maybe one step farther. And you could say, well, the person who's doing the writing doesn't even have to be here. The person may already be dead. They may have lived hundreds of years ago. And to prove your point, you could take out a book. I've taken this one out. Hop and Pop by Dr. Seuss. And you could say, well, look, this man, Dr. Seuss, wrote this book many years ago. And it's called Hop on Pop. And look, we can open it up, and I can read what he wrote way back many years ago. 3 tree, 3 fish in a tree. Fish in a tree, how can that be? So this is a very important thing to show your child. The person who does the writing does not have to be there for you to read it. They could have written it many years ago. They could have written it halfway across the world. And of course, this is the beauty of writing. So this is a very, very important point to get across. And of course, you can also make the point that, like I did, you can read out loud. Red, red, they call me red. Or you could read to yourself silently. And of course, that's a very important point to make. So I think a good way to conclude this would be to say, you might want to say to your child, well, look, this alphabet is a very handy thing, isn't it? You have these 26 letters, and with these letters, you can write anything you want, you could read anything you want, you could leave notes for people, you could write books. It's a very, very handy thing we have here. And that's it for Lesson 1, the alphabetic principle. And I'll see you in Lesson 2, where we will do some work on the letter sounds and letter recognition. I'll show you some activities you can do with your child to really to work on those concepts.